G'day mate, 40 here.
Trial. For 11 years, Karl Ashanti defended the NYPD in civil rights cases. Then he was arrested for a crime he didn't commit. Written by Jake Pearson for New York Magazine. Narrated by Landon Whitson.
Okay, so this guy is a police lawyer, and he has one unfortunate incident with the police where he won't take instructions, and he gets his comeuppance. It's pretty rich.
This article was published in partnership with ProPublica. Please be advised, this article contains adult language.
Okay, you ready for this? Adult language,
By the
guys.
time Karl Ashanti neared his office in the New York City Law Department's headquarters in March 2018, the police were shutting down Park Place. Ice had fallen from the buildings above, so an officer had cordoned off the area. Ashanti flashed his work ID, and the cop let him through.
Right, so immediately, all right, if an area has been cordoned off, all right, may not necessarily be the best thing to try to flash your ID or to use what you presume is your power to get your way. Right? Maybe just follow the same rules that everybody else has to follow.
Then, about 2/3 of the way down the block, he ran into a second officer. "Turn around now," John Shapiro barked.
Okay, so if someone has a gun, someone has power over you, someone can really hurt you, right? If someone can damage you in innumerable ways, and they tell you to turn around, the best thing to do is to turn around. But Karl Ashanti, he knew better.
"Said now." Ashanti stiffened. The two men were about the same size.
Right, so if you stiffen and you start to put out resistance against someone who has a lot of power and authority over you and the ability to hurt you, you may not like what happens next.
Each around 6 feet tall and 240 pounds. Shapiro was in his blue New York Police Department uniform. Ashanti, a city lawyer, wasn't due in court that day and had dressed casually in dark slacks, a button-down, an overcoat, and a winter hat.
Oh, so if he'd been in a suit and tie, then the police officer would have just let him march on by? I don't think so.
The two had never met before, but there was something about Shapiro's brusque demeanor that Ashanti recognized.
Right, so you can take exception to people's brusque demeanor. You can get annoyed that they're not treating you with the respect that you think you deserve. All right? But that's not usually going to serve you very well.
For 11 years, Ashanti had defended NYPD officers against lawsuits alleging civil rights violations in federal court. He was a senior litigator in a little-known law department unit that exclusively handles such cases, the Special Federal Litigation Division, known simply as Special Fed. As a black man who'd grown up in Jamaica, Queens, Ashanti thought he brought valuable perspective to the work. He'd seen how black people, and black men in particular, could, through no fault of their own, be targeted by prejudiced men in uniform.
I'm sure that happens because police are human. It happens an infinitesimal amount of time. Right? Overwhelmingly, when people get targeted by men in uniform, it's because they behave badly. Right? Overwhelmingly, those parts of the community that commit the most crime are under-policed. They're not over-policed. Right? The news media and our elites and Democratic politicians and Black Lives Matter, they have this agenda that, black life is just way over-policed. But for those black people who are suffering at the hands of criminality in their communities, right, they don't experience life as over-policed. Right? If anything, these communities are under-policed and are dramatically less policed than they were 8 years ago, 3 years ago, and that's why there's dramatically more serious crime, because if you don't nip it in the bud, if you don't nip it at the broken window stage, bad behavior tends to escalate.
Still, Ashanti took pride in his legal skills and had come to embrace the combative approach that Special Fed typically took in fighting claims of police abuse, even in the face of compelling evidence that police behavior violated the constitutional rights of the people they had sworn to protect.
Okay, so police have to often react in a split-second manner, right? They don't always have the time to deliberate, to consult with a constitutional lawyer. Right? Generally speaking, if you are coming to the attention of police, in all likelihood it's because you have misbehaved, you have placed yourself in the company of people who misbehave, and you appear like someone who's misbehaving.
On Park Place, Ashanti told Shapiro, who was white, that he was trying to get to his office. Shapiro insisted he go back the way he came.
Okay, so he's been told twice now he needs to turn around, go back the way he came. And arguing with a policeman usually doesn't work out real well for you, right? Arguing with anyone who has power over you, like a boss, a supervisor, right, usually isn't going to turn out well for you.
Ashanti moved between two parked cars to cross the street, and Shapiro.
Okay, so he hadn't been told, oh, you can just move any way you want. Right, Shapiro, police officer, told him to turn around and walk backwards. So Ashanti argues with the police officer and then disobeys the police officer. Right, how do you think this is going to turn out for him?
Hustled to cut off his path, repeating his order. The two
Okay, he's now been told 3 times what to do.
men faced each other in the middle of the road. Shapiro tapped Ashanti on his shoulder. Ashanti backpedaled and asked to speak to a supervisor. Shapiro took out his handcuffs. Within 90 seconds of their first encounter, the officer arrested the attorney.
Okay, so police essentially have dictatorial power over you for a time, right? Just like people get all sorts of bad ideas because of rhetoric about democracy, but even in democracy, you have lots of little dictators, including police officers, bureaucrats, right? They don't have ultimate global power, but for many of your interactions, effectively, they're going to have absolute power for a period of time. And going to war with a dictator is not going to work out so well. So the United States president essentially has dictatorial power when it comes to foreign policy. So the US is both a democracy and it has considerable elements of dictatorship, as we saw when we lost all these constitutional rights during COVID. To restrict the spread of COVID, we have to take these emergency measures. So real emergencies or putative emergencies are continually invoked by democratic leaders, meaning small d, democratic leaders, right, to provide a justification for taking away rights. This is the way it's always happened. This is the way it will always happen. We'll never have a functioning democracy that does not have considerable elements of dictatorship. And in effect, when you interact with a policeman, situations like this, the policeman has dictatorial power.
Shapiro claimed in criminal filings that Ashanti resisted arrest and shoved him twice, so forcefully that Shapiro had to step back to catch his balance. The New York Post splashed the allegations in its pages, calling Ashanti a livid lawyer. It wasn't true.
Okay, wasn't true, but did Karl Ashanti do anything to contribute to his own troubles? Yes. He got into a needless confrontation with a police officer by not recognizing the police officer's due authority. He disobeyed the police officer multiple times, and then the police officer did lie about him, and the New York Post published something that wasn't true. But this is what happens when you instigate confrontations, right? The more you have confrontations with people, right, the more adrenaline you're going to bring out in them. And when people have adrenaline running, when people are escalating in a confrontation, right, they're more and more likely to say things about you that are untrue, and people are increasingly incentivized to do as much damage as possible to you.
Security camera footage showed no shoving during the incident. As it unfolded, 9 other people freely walked up and down Park Place.
Okay, so even if you get into a nasty confrontation and you have dictatorial power, even dictators don't have absolute power. Nikita Khrushchev was the dictator of the Soviet Union, but after losing the Cuban Missile Crisis to John F. Kennedy, right, he was removed as dictator of the Soviet Union. So even dictators are not the boss in the final analysis, right? You know who is the boss? The situation. And so you may think that you've got the power, like this police officer did, but security camera footage will show that you're lying, and that's not really going to help you. So yeah, you can temporarily wield tremendous power over people, but if you misuse that power, if you forget the temporary nature of that power, you're very likely to become absolutely humiliated because you misread the nature of your power. It's temporary and situational. Right? Many people with temporary and situational power, they get drunk on it, and they don't realize that when the situation changes, when the nature of the time changes, all right, that power is going away.
Court records revealed it wasn't the first time Shapiro had been accused of abusing his power. By the time he detained Ashanti, the officer had already been named in 3 false arrest lawsuits.
Okay, so there are things you can do to minimize your chances of getting sued. All right, and so it wouldn't surprise me if police work attracts a type of person who may get a little drunk on power.